All right, Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon, you all. So today we're going to continue our topic, which is relating to meat, understanding meat, and the process of cooking meat. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's see what the definition of meat is. Okay. So it says here, meat consists of muscle tissue and is considered the flesh. Atau isi of domesticated animals and of wild game animals. Wild game animals ni merujuk pada binatang buruan lah. Misalnya rusa, babi hutan, seladang. Okay, alright. Dan meat dalam food service operation ni is usually the largest expense item. Okay, dia antara bahan mentah yang paling premium dan agak mahal lah berbanding dengan bahan-bahan lain. Okay, so composition meat biasanya ada baik- berapa dia punya breakdown dia. Kalau kita tengok kat sini, first sekali dia kata water. Water consists of 75%, followed by protein which is 20%. Fat is about 5% of the muscle tissue and as much as 30% of the beast carcass, while carbohydrate is a very small amount. So komposisi ni is reflective lah of all organic life yang wujud dalam muka bumi ni, which more than 70% of a meat of human is actually water lah. Okay. Alright, kita kat sini, water is a high percentage of water in muscle tissue explains the challenge of shrinkage during cooking. Excessive moisture loss during cooking um, usually results in dry meat, loss of product weight, and loss of product profit lah. Okay, so when you are cooking meat, if especially steak, biasanya we want to retain the moisture lah to ensure the enjoyment of eating. A dry meat will usually result in toughness ataupun rasa-rasa liat tu lah, which is not desirable. Okay, so the second component about 20 tadi, about 20% is protein. So it consists of muscle tissue and becomes firmer and loses moisture as it's coagulated. The doneness is related to the desired degree of muscle protein coagulation, and excessive coagulation result in the lessening of the protein and the moisture loss. Okay. All right. The third element yang persist dalam meat ialah lemak atau fat lah. Okay. Selain daripada pemberi tenaga, peranan fat dalam uh, daging ni is dia kata apa? Is deposited through tissue as marbling, which separates muscle fibers and make them easier to chew. Surface fat retains the moisture during cooking, and a certain amount of fat is therefore desirable because we want to maintain juiciness, tenderness, and of course flavor. Alright. So apabila kita masak steak, bahagian lemak tu apabila dia dimasak dia akan have that marbling effect lah. That marbling effect lah antara penyebab yang bagi steak tu rasa juicy, tender dan juga rasa sedap dia lah. Okay. But those who are health conscious biasanya dia dia tak akan bother to eat the fat lah sebab yalah kita makan lemak biasanya masuk dalam badan and boleh menyebabkan kita gain weight lah if we do not control fat intake. Sedap memang sedap, tak kira tak kata lah. Okay. But for excessive consumption of fat seringkali menyebabkan benda yang tak elok. Alright. Okay. And lastly, the fourth element, carbohydrate. Okay. Carbohydrate content dalam meat dia kata sini sangat-sangat significant lah. It's very small. Okay. The small amount that is present is small amount of carbohydrate that persists in meat um, is necessary for Maillard reaction to occur, resulting in flavor and browning of the meat lah. Okay. The structure of the meat first of all, it consists of muscle fiber. Okay, this determines the meat's texture or grain. Fine grain meat biasanya is a dia kata kat sini, it's a small muscle fiber bound in small bound, coarse texture meat. Dia punya muscle fiber is much larger. For connective tissues, dia kata, it binds muscle fibers together in bundles. It has collagen in it because it breaks and collagen is break down by heat, acid and enzyme and tenderizer. It is also connective tissue juga ada elastin because it might be physically removed or broken down mechanically. Okay. Now, sama juga dengan telur beef ni, dia ada dia punya own grading system lah. Alright. Um, so kalau Amerika dia guna the USDA rating lah. So dia kata di sini, a guarantee of wholesomeness indicates by a round stem, as you can see here. All meat produced for public consumption must be inspected by the governing body. USDA ni di Amerika, UK dia ada governing body yang lain. Malaysia saya tak berapa pasti. What is the official? Tapi tak apa, kita boleh look up nanti siapa yang in charge of grading beef ni. Okay. But generally, tak kisahlah di negara mana, the inspection is ensured so that the products are processed under strict sanitary guidelines and the beef product that we get in the supermarket are wholesome and fit for human consumption lah. Okay. All right. The quality grading is usually based on 5 things. Number 1, texture. Second, firmness. Third, the color of lean meat. Fourth, the age or maturity of the meat, and lastly, the marbling. All right. So these are just some of the examples of beef grades in the American rating lah. All right. Okay. In order to make the beef tender over time, dia sebenarnya dia kena lalui a process called aging. Okay. Biasanya kalau kita sembelih cattle, kalau kita masak dia immediately, biasanya daging dia masih liat lah. Okay, sebab it does not have time to age and become tenderized. Siapa yang pernah terlibat dengan korban lembu masa raya haji, biasanya akan tahulah uh, uh, tentang perkara ni. Alright. So dia kata kat sini apa, wet age, smaller cuts of meat are enclosed in a convect air and moisture-proof package. It's protected from bacteria and mold. While dry age, dia kata larger cuts of meat are exposed to air control condition and they can lose weight up to 2%. But dry aging, dia kata sini, is more expensive than wet aging. Okay. Nah, dapat pemahaman yang lebih lanjut pada pro, jom kita tengok video ni.
Hi, I'm John Stoll, Director of Fresh Meats and Sustainable Programs at Dolan Bailey. And today we're going to talk about the difference between wet age and dry age. Some terminology that you've probably heard, bannered about on restaurant menus and so forth, and a lot of people wonder, well, what is dry age and what is wet age and what does aging do and things like that. So we're going to go over it a little bit. And I've got some ribs here, and we're going to talk about the differences. This is a dry-aged rib that we have. And this is a dry-aged rib with the bone still on it, and it has been in our dry-age room for 28 days, which is what we recommend if you're going to do a dry aging, is to do it at least 21 to 28 days, preferably 28. Basically, what dry aging is taking meat and taking it out of its bag, out of its cryovac package. This is how it comes to us from a meat packer. And then you take it out of the bag, and then you leave it in an isolated room. We're in our dry aging room right now, and this room is kept at a constant temperature, kept at a constant airflow, and we don't have people going in and out of it all day long. So it's something, and that's the key to dry aging is every time you open the door to the cooler, you're changing the temperature and humidity. And the key to dry aging is keeping it constant. So let's talk about aging for just a second. The reason that you want to age meat is because it makes it more tender. There's enzymes in the meat called calpains that actually soften the tissues and make it softer or easier to bite, easier to cut through. And that reaction or that chemical process happens whether it's in a cryovac bag, and this is a rib that has come, from a packer, and this has been wet aged for the same amount of time. This has been wet aged for 28 days. You can see it's a lot bigger because it hasn't shrunk any. All the moisture is still in it. But the same process that makes it more tender happens in this bag as it does outside of the bag. So the tenderization process doesn't matter. Wet aging and dry aging is the same for tenderization. The difference comes in the flavor. The dry aging, because it's exposed to air, two things happen. Number one, the moisture leaves the piece of meat. In 28 days, you're probably going to lose 15% of the weight of the cut. And most of that weight is going to come from the lean portion, the muscle, not the fat. The fat will retain the water more than the lean will. So the lean muscle part of it actually shrinks around the fat, makes the fat more pronounced, which gives it more flavor. There's also a bacteria that creates a flavor profile, the kind of a smoky, nutty flavor in the dry aging process that's very desirable, gives it a very robust meat flavor. And that's the key to dry aging is to get that flavor. And what happens is you get the surface drying that'll happen within about a week and creates a crust over the muscle. And then what's inside of this is still moist and red, a little darker red than typically would be in a wet aged. But the surface drying actually retains what moisture's in there, but it shrinks up around the muscle and creates that flavor. So again, 28 days, and the key to doing it, a lot of people think they can do this in the refrigerator. It's not a good idea unless you've got a refrigerator that you're not opening and closing 20 times a day. So basically, if you don't have kids, you can maybe possibly do some dry aging, or if you've got another refrigerator in the basement. But the key to doing it is to make sure that it's not, that the temperature and humidity stay the same. You want to keep it around 80% humidity and constant temperature, below 40 degrees, the colder the better. We keep this room about 35 degrees, and we keep fans blowing to keep the air separated. And you can see the dry age cuts that we have separation so that the air can get all the way around them. And again, this is something that we do, and it's sold to restaurants, and you can put it on their menu. You see a dry aged steak, and it's a great experience if you've never had it. It's a flavor that's unmistakable, and you can't get any other way. So it does create a great flavor, but the tenderization process is about the same as buying a wet aged steak, which wet age is it's aging in its own juices in a cryovac. A cryovac is a term for, it's a vacuum sealed bag. No air gets into this.
So ni lah dia kata cryo bag lah. One key distinction daripada dry aging, the wet aging, you have to wrap the beef or meat inside this cryo bag, and the tenderization happen within dalam plastik ni lah, as opposed to dry age. You keep it in a specialized room at a specific temperature, and you have to maintain the temperature and the humidity of that room. Kalau dalam tempoh 28 hari ada buka tutup, dia punya aging tu tak akan begitu sempurna lah, right?
This bag, the air is pulled out of the bag, and it's sealed around it, and it'll maintain the quality of the cut for up to 45, 50 days if you keep it at a constant temperature. I wouldn't recommend it, but we try to age all of our middle meats at least 21 to 28 days. So that's the process of dry aging versus wet aging. So next time you see it on your menu, you will know what it is, and I recommend you try it.
Okay, so that's the description of dry age versus wet age, yeah? Okay, let's continue. All right. So meat or meat-related products, tak kisahlah daripada cow ataupun game animal, biasanya dia wujud dalam pelbagai bentuk. First form is carcass. So sama juga ayam, carcass kalau ikutkan by English definition merujuk pada bangkai. But kalau dalam bahasa tempatan bangkai itu biasanya merujuk pada uh, benda yang tak elok lah. So kita pakai kataan rangka lah sebab dia appropriate. Okay. So beef apabila when the animal is slaughtered, buang kulit, before it's been cut into small pieces, the whole body is called the carcass. All right, it consists of uh, whole animal except for the head, feet, entrails, and the hide. All right. So when breaking down a carcass, it can be divided into sides, quarters, fore saddles, and hind saddles. Right. Okay. When the meat is cut down into small sizes, namanya sebagai wholesale cuts atau primal cuts lah. Okay, dia kata the primary divisions of quarters, fore saddles, hind saddles, and carcass. Apabila kita potong, it will be small enough to manage in food service kitchens, large enough to allow variety of cuts for different uses, and easier to utilize completely than quarters or halves. Right, fabricated cuts, dia kata apa? Primal cuts into very small pieces, and this is used for roasting, making steaks, chops, cutlet, stewing meat, or ground meat. Portion control cuts, they are cuts into ready to cook, processed accordingly to customer specification. Alright, so selain pada jenis-jenis cut, kita ada organ lain lah. Misalnya organ meat, misalnya offal, tail, heart, lungs, and kidneys. Okay. In order to identify which cuts falls under which part of the cow, misalnya kita bayangkan satu karkas lembu and dia ada dua bahagian. The fore quarter, bahagian depan lembu, and hind quarter is the back of the cow. Okay, to get a better picture of where all these parts of the cow are. Okay, let's see the diagram that I will share. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at our friend here. All right, so the fourth quarter would be this part of the cow, and the hind quarter is usually this part of the cow, right? You see my mouse? All right, so the first part um, of the cow, see here is the chunk. It is it's the neck region, and most economic cuts paling murah dia kata. So the chunk is about 20% of the carcass. Okay, so from this chunk, you can produce several cuts, such as the boneless chunk roast or pot roast. Okay, when you go down before dekat mana dekat ni, bawah dagu dia, dia kata that this is the brisket. Okay, zoom in. So the brisket is the breast or the lower part of the chest. Kettles usually do not have collarbones, and this must support about 60% of the body weight of standing cattle. The meat in this section has a significant amount of connective tissue. All right, so since dia banyak connective tissue, meaning dia kena masak dengan lebih lama and thoroughly lah. So in order to cook the brisket part of the cow, dia kata apa? Usually slow, moist heat method is advisable to make the brisket tenderize. Yeah. So from the brisket, biasanya kita dapat a brisket whole or a brisket half cut. Alright. Okay, dan sama juga dalam nota dia kata ke sini wholesale cuts, primal cuts, the large cuts of meat that are shipped into grocery stores. Misalnya contoh sini chunk, brisket shank, while retail cuts are the family size or single serving cuts that are purchased in the store. So wholesale cuts ialah potongan besar, the brisket, the shank, or the chunk, ribs, while the retail cuts are the sub are the specific cuts that is produced from a specific section. Okay. So dia kat sini, macam you tengok beberapa contoh kat sini, brisket dia boleh produce a half brisket or whole brisket, while the shank they can get a shank crust cut or a lean ground beef. Okay, ribs pun dia ada ribs roast ataupun back ribs. Okay, right. So usually the forefront of the cow is this part, yeah. Okay, take a look at my annotation. This part of the cow is the fourth. This section is the fourth quarter of the cow, while this section of the cow is the hind quarter, yeah. So hind quarter dia ada 3 bahagian, while the fourth quarter ada 5. Okay. Okay, let's continue with the other parts of the cow. Okay, so behind the chunk is the ribs. Okay, it contains 7 ribs and the parts of the vertebral bones. It is one of the most desirable parts because it is one of the tenderest part. And from the ribs, you can produce a rib roast or back ribs. Okay, as we go down, bagian perut, this is the plate part. Okay, is it's also known as the short plate. This section that is separated from the ribs, and from here boleh dapat skirt steak ataupun short ribs. Okay, short ribs kat atas, back ribs dekat short ribs kat bawah, back ribs biasanya di atas. Okay, now as we go on to the hind quarter of the cow, this whole section here is the loin. Kita kata apa? Consists of a short loin, sirloin, and a tenderloin. This part of the beef is usually the most expensive cut because keyword here is the most tender part of the meat. Okay, some of the retail cuts that you can get from the loin would be the T-bone steak or the porterhouse steak. All right. Bawah dia is the flank. Dia kata apa sini? The flank is the area between the body and the hind legs. Flank steak is commonly used for fajitas or beef jerkies. All right. So this section is the flank. Alright, beef jerkies ni dia akan mirip serunding lah, alright. And as the final section of the cow, bahagian buntut ataupun ekor, dia kata the top round, bottom round, eye round, rump and tip muscle. It is versatile and fairly inexpensive cut of the cow lah, alright. So some of the retail cuts that you can get from the round is the round steak or the rump roast. Okay, so that's basically about the breakdown of the parts of the cow ya. So ingat dia ada forefront dan juga hind. Dia ada bahagian fore quarter dan juga hind quarter ya. Right? Take note because mungkin akan keluar dalam exam lah the different parts of the cow. Okay, let's continue. Yang ni boleh baca sendiri. Alright, fabrication meat. Okay, the illustration. Alright. when you cut a certain part of the beef, bukan saja you akan dapat lemak, you akan also dapat satu lapisan warna putih yang nipis. This is called the silver skin. Alright, dia kata sini, it is a thin layer of membrane of connective tissue that often covers the surface of muscle. Alright, for presentation or before cooking, biasanya kita trim lah. Tapi dia kata kat sini, not always necessary to remove for braise, but if you want to cook your meat in roast, saute or grills, it is advisable to remove the silver skin ni lah. Sekejap saya tunjuk kat mana silver skin tu. You can look at this short video demonstration of how silver skin is being removed. Yeah.
This silver, and we're almost down to what's known as a steak ready.
So the silver skin is this layer here. It is not fat. Yeah. It's a layer of connective tissue. Right. Don't get confused is as fat. Dia beza.
The trick to getting this silver off, the tendon is much thicker up here because that's where the joint would be. So it's a lot easier, and I have found this is just kind of the technique I've developed, because most people you will see will just take their knife, shove it through there under the silver and go like that and do like that and leave a bunch of meat on it. This took a long time for me to get to figure out how to do it, but you know, I found because this, let me try to do it this way so you can see that, is to get this started up here at the front where that silver skin is thicker so I can get a handle. So you can see I've got it cleaned up like that. I'll get this little edge part to where I can take it all off in one fell swoop. And I just angle my knife up all the way down and follow that tendon. Now, this tendon dives on down in there and curls around up here in the front, dive on down a little further.
Okay, so that's basically where the silver skin is, and as you can see in this video, they remove from the tenderloin sebab kita nak masak daging tu dengan lebih sempurna lah. Okay. All right, the tenderness and appropriate cooking methods. Okay, the principle of low heat cooking. Dia kat sini apa? High heat toughens and shrinks the protein, which often result in excessive moisture loss. Therefore, if you wish to do roast, dia kata apa? Roast cooked at lower temperatures would have a better yield lah as compared to roast at high temperature. Moist heat penetrates quickly because liquid and steam are better conductors than air, right? And you need to break down the connective tissues, especially for the rib and loin cuts. Dia kata always the most tender cuts, okay, and usually it's the most favorable parts to do steaks and chop lah, okay. The loin ataupun kalau kita based on the diagram tadi, dia bahagian belakang, tulang belakang lembu tu lah, daging dia yang paling lembut. Okay. Okay, in terms of leg or round, dia kata beef. Okay, this part, the leg or the round is more suitable for bracing because bracing ni is a combination of dry heat and moist heat. Okay, kalau nak kalau nak analogi mudah braising ni macam mana, you imagine any masakan daging yang berkuah lah. Selalunya kalau Western style, it will usually refer to beef stew lah, which use the braising method. But if we are talking in Eastern context, you can relate it to curries, you can relate it to apa lagi, kurma, masak gulai, masak lemak, or anything yang berkuah ya. That's what braising is all about, meaning the beef is cooked. Okay, tak apalah, saya tunjuk contoh bagaimana braised product looks like. Okay, kalau based on definition, dia kata bracing is a combination cooking that uses both wet and dry. Typically, the food is browned at a high temperature, then simmered in a covered pot in a cooking liquid. Okay. Tengok kalau based on contoh illustration ni, anything that is braised meat biasanya berkuah lah, but it's not soup. Selalunya dia yang you tengok sini ialah stewed beef stew lah. Okay. So balik pada this part of the slide, the most suitable method for braising biasanya the leg or the round lah. Sebab dia punya connective tissue is quite high. Therefore, moist heat or combination of moist and dry heat is preferable lah to make it tender, right? Okay, we move on to the next part, which is the chunk or the shoulder. Sama juga, most suitable for braising. Kata ni apa? The meats they are often braised but are young enough to roast or cut into chops for broiling. Right, next part will be the shank, breast or flank, which is the rear part of the beef. Okay, dia kata kat sini, can be broiled if cooked rare, then sliced thin. So broiling is okay. Masa yang ni saya pernah tunjuk masa the earlier weeks of the class. Okay, broiling is both grilling and broiling uses intense direct heat to cook food. They are both required the same watchful eye to avoid burning, and they both provide a similar charring and caramelization. So nak tahu beza antara grilling a beef or broiling a beef, tengok illustration gambar ni. Okay, grilling is basically putting it on a griller and the heat from the charcoal or the arang will cook the beef lah. Okay, as opposed to broiling, dia kata indoor cooking for charred caramelization. Okay, intense heat from the oven broiler. The oven masak controls cooking temperature. Preheat boiler pan allows fat and grease to that. Okay, so grilling you bayangkan pemasakan daging tu atas pemasakan arang tu di luar. Broiling you bayangkan aktiviti membakar tu tetapi dibuat dalam oven yang a broiler oven, meaning it only transfers dry heat, not moist heat. Yeah, okay. Because grilling and broiling both involves dry heat. The only difference is how the dry heat is dissipated through the food. Yeah. Okay. Continue on. Okay. For the shank, breast, and flank, this part of the meat are often braised. Okay. The shanks are suitable for braising due to their high collagen content that is converted to gelatin, giving the body to braising liquid and good eating qualities to the meat. Okay, bahagian ni juga sesuai untuk dimasak stew ataupun dimasak apa-apa masakan berkuah lah. Okay. Alright. Other factors influencing choices of cooking method. Alright. Is the fat content. Okay. Untuk ensure daging tu retain dia punya moisture, selalunya kita terpaksa bergantung pada fat content lah. Alright. And biasanya melibatkan dua proses, which is budding and juga larding. The first one, budding, is basically tying slices of fat over the surface of meat to protect them while roasting. While larding pula is inserting strips of fat with a needle into the meat, load in marbling. Okay. Alright. This short video basically differentiates or illustrates what is larding and what is budding. Yeah.
Certain cuts of meat that are naturally lean require the addition of fat or other moisturizing ingredients during cooking times. Historically, strips of fat have been wrapped around the meat, known as barding, or
So when it's wrapped around the beef, this is budding. If it's injected with a needle at the center of the beef, this one is called larding. Yeah.
Or, to prevent drying out, it was inserted into the meat, called larding. This can also be accomplished by inserting garlic cloves into the roast.
Okay. So the purpose for fat to be coated around the lean meat or inside the lean meat is to maintain the moisture lah. Okay. Because kalau termasak, moisture dia hilang, that tender part of the meat akan jadi liat lah. Alright. Next. Alright. And this is not the only goal of cooking. Okay. The other goal when you cook beef is number one, to develop flavor. Orang makan beef atau apa-apa saja mestilah nak makan benda yang sedap kan. Okay. The second goal is to prevent excessive screen shrinkages because when moisture is lost, it loses its volume, and when it loses its volume, usually uh, dia punya tenderness pun hilang lah. Okay. And of course, when we cook the beef, we want to give it a good appearance lah in terms of the browning effect on the outer part of the beef. Okay. Right. So searing and sealing. Okay. Searing a meat at high heat creates desirable flavor, color browning of all sides. Okay, searing meat at high heat creates the following effects. Okay. Juga ada kata apa? Blanching meat in boiling water would lead to some protein coagulation. Not as much as protein is carried out of the meat and lost moisture. All right. Sealing does not seal the juice in as meat has no pores to seal. Rather, it has an open network of fibers. Okay, let's look at the video of searing process. Yeah. All right. This short video basically clarify the concept of searing and sealing in meats. Yeah.
The biggest myth in the world of cooking, something that I've been trying to debunk for decades, is the idea that searing a piece of meat will seal in its juices. It's just not true. The most important factor when it comes to keeping juices in meat is the temperature to which you cook the meat. So go ahead and sear the meat to get a nice flavor on the.
So searing is basically developing the desired color or appearance on the outer surface of the meat. Tetapi di kat sini orang sering anggap kalau kita sear the meat, especially guna butter or oil for that matter, dia akan seal the moisture. This concept is not really true.
The surface, but if you want to keep the meat juicy, you have to cook it carefully.
If you want to really seal the meat, you have to cook it carefully and make sure the temperature is within the acceptable range.
So the inside doesn't get above about 140 degrees. Anything above that, and it's going to be dry no matter what you did to the outside.
Okay, so that's the concept or the misconcept behind searing versus sealing ni lah. Okay, searing konsep dia ialah bagi the browning effect of the steak. Okay, while sealing tu is basically trying your best to make sure the moisture does not escape from the beef. Okay, in order to really seal the moisture, you have to make sure the temperature is within the acceptable range. If you exceed maybe by 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, dia memang the sealing process tu akan fail lah kiranya. Okay. Okay, cooking frozen meat. Meat cooked from frozen state loses no moisture to defrosting, but lost more moisture during cooking. Okay, cooking frozen meat complicates the cooking process, and adjustment needs to be done. If you want to cook whole frozen meat, it requires more energy, therefore more meat. So that's why most meat are thawed first, then prepared. Okay, kalau you nak masak meat from a frozen state, basically it's a very complicated process lah. Okay. Kalau tak kena cara, from fridge to the stove, it will require lots of energy, and silap-silap, moisture will not be retained, and you can lose moisture very quickly if it's not thawed or biar they're warm at room temperature during the thawing process. Yeah. Okay, level of doneness seperti mana yang saya tunjuk dalam video demonstration about apabila 2 weeks ago. The touch method, meaning using the finger technique lah, okay. But to refresh your mind of how the color looks like from rare, medium, and well done, jom kita buka Google. So as you can see here in this picture, rare brown surface is on the outside and thin layer of gray and red interior. If you go down to medium rare or medium, the center will be more pinkish, warm red color. Medium should be pinkish color. Medium well, very slight pinkish color. While well done, no pink, just brown throughout the surface. Yeah. Okay. So that is dry heat. What happens if you use moist heat? Okay. Moist heat, okay, doneness of meat in moistness dia tak ada rare, medium rare or medium. Most of the time the meat is well done, yeah, okay. And the doneness is indicated by the tendiness, kelembutan, not by temperature, alright. Dia kata low temperatures, no higher than simmering, are essential to avoid toughening protein in moist cooked meat, right? So kalau you buat stew, you buat daging, there is no such thing as medium rare or medium, ya. The beef will be well done, but to measure the tenderness, kita kena rasa sama dia lembut atau tak lah. Okay. Juiciness, alright. 3 faktor menyebabkan juiciness of the steak. Biasanya it's the fat, gelatin, and for protein coagulation lah. Okay. Alright, so selain daripada the various types of cuts and various sections of the carcass, lain-lain organ juga digunakanlah untuk dalam masakan. Kalau di Malaysia ni yang paling popular apa? Oxtail, sup ekor lah. Okay. And ada juga yang makan apa? Hati dan juga kidney. Dia list kat sini ada juga yang makan otak, makan lidah. Wonder how does it taste? Tak apa, mungkin you all boleh try. And tell me how these other organs ni taste like. Okay, alright. So skip je. So game ni bukan merujuk pada video game ataupun apa-apa permainan ya. Game ni is a term used to refer to poultry or meat animals that is found in the wild. Okay, ayam Belanda yang tinggal di hutan ke, arnab ke, rusa ke, diorang fall under the category of game ni lah. Okay. Alright. In terms of storage, dia kata kat sini, fresh meat should be stored at temperature between 0 to 2 degrees, meaning you sebelumnya you kena put it in freezer, ya, alright. In order for it to tenderize over time in aging process, dia kata allow for proper air circulation and a constant temperature and constant humidity. Do not open vacuum packet meat until ready to use. Keep meat separate in cooler and avoid cross contamination. And to ensure freshness, it is advisable that you use it as quickly as possible and do not store for more than 4 days. Yeah. As for frozen meat, this is the acceptable range. Sebenarnya you simpan at a temperature below -18. Wrap frozen meat well to prevent freezer burn is recommended. Shelf life for meat is sekian. Kalau beef is 6 bulan. Kalau pork, bagi yang boleh makan pork, 4 months. defrost carefully in the refrigerator and do not refreeze thaw meat. Apabila you dah keluarkan meat, thaw it room temperature, guna untuk masak. Jangan you thaw the meat, lepas tu simpan balik. It will not sustain its freshness lah, meaning the shelf life is already spoiled. Okay. Okay, kita sambung sikit lagi ya. Cooking meat and game. Alright. So meat can usually cook both dry heat dan juga moist heat. Alright. Yang ni saya akan skip tu. These are basically the steps that you or general petua or rule of thumb that you can follow if you want to roast or do barbecue for meat ya. Dia punya proses dia, description dia agak panjang. So yang ni saya sarankan you baca sendiri. Okay. Cuma saya just nak tekan kat sini di peringkat grilling atau broiling ni, when you cook it on the griller, kita kat sini cook until item is quarter done, meaning kita taklah biar one side tu masak 100% dan baru kita nak pusingkan daging tu kan masak bahagian yang belum masak lagi. Okay, we need to rotate it several times because not only we want it to cook, but we want an attractive pattern of the griller sticking on the surface of the meat. Okay, so that's the purpose why the meat is flipped more than 2 times because we want to get the pattern of the griller on the meat. Okay, all right. So when you eat any form of meat, whether it's steak, whether it's cut in thin slices, biasanya is eaten with accompaniment of sauces lah. So you can choose almost any type of sauce or accompaniments such as compound butter, buttered sauce, any brown sauce variation, whether it's a normal brown sauce, black pepper sauce, or rosemary or maybe mushroom. Tomato sauce pun dia punya variants of tomato sauce pun boleh pakai, and those who prefer a much spicier accompaniment can use salsa relish or maybe chili sauce. Okay, all right. When you are doing prawn boiling, okay, if you want to do prawn boiling, it's advised that use a heavy iron skillet to brown very thin steaks without overcooking, because the prawn broiler is useful for cooking thin steaks to the rare stage, because an overhead broiler is not hot enough to form a good brown crust on thin steak before overcooking the inside. So heavy iron skillet, sekejap kita cari macam mana rupa dia. Okay, let's look at this video of how a pan broil process works.
A perfectly good steak is? Well, the answer is simple: an incredible steak. You don't even need a grill. If you're cooking indoors, you can still achieve an unbelievably juicy, perfectly cooked steak. The key is to sear first to develop an intensely flavorful caramelized crust that fills in all the juices. Pan broil is a two-stage method that uses your broiler for searing and finishing to your preferred degree of doneness. First, remove the steaks from the refrigerator and allow them to come to room temperature about 30 minutes. Before beginning to cook, assemble your olive oil, sea salt, or kosher salt and pepper. Place a dry cast iron skillet in a preheated broiler or high heat about 6 inches from any flame or heating element. Heat the pan for about 20 minutes. Meanwhile, brush the steak with olive oil and rub with coarse kosher salt or sea salt and freshly ground pepper. When the pan is heated, pull the oven rack out to give yourself clear access to the pan and lay the steaks carefully into the skillet to avoid splatters. Be extremely careful because the entire pan, including the handle, will be extremely hot. Also, have your vent or fan on high because this method creates a fair amount of smoke as the steak is seared. Sear the steaks for 2 to 3 minutes on each side. After the steaks are seared, reduce your oven to moderate heat, about 350 to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and continue cooking the steaks to your desired doneness. Transfer the steaks to your dinner platter or plate and let rest for about 5 minutes before slicing and on its own or paired with other flavors.
So that's basically how pan broil process works here. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, salting and pan frying. Okay, basic salting and pan frying techniques can be adapted for the needs of different preparation. Stir fried is a form of sauteing using high heat, seasoner, and small amount of oil. Okay, those yang buat apa tu stir fried beef melalui proses stir frying ni. Macam mana those yang lalui stir fried beef akan tahulah the steps and procedures needed. Okay. So these are generally the steps. Ni tak apa, saya akan skip. You boleh go through sendiri dalam nota. Okay. For simmering and poaching, alright. Dia kata, generally only lean, less tender cuts and curd meat are simmered because simmer meat has less flavor. Stewing means cooking small piece of meat by simmering or stewing ni biasanya dia tak simmers. Stewing is more related to braising. Okay. Submersion poaching is more common with fish and poultry as opposed to meat. Okay. Because poaching ni biasanya kita masak untuk benda yang delicate lah. Meat ni bukan benda yang delicate. It is quite a stable substance. So it's rarely poached. Okay. In steaming, meat is cooked partially by simmering liquid and partly by steam trapped in the cooking utensil. Okay, kalau this is some of the basic simmering and poaching review. Steps dia macam mana. So kalau simmering and poaching meat pun usually kita nak produce a broth atau soup lah. Right. Okay, ni saya akan skip. Alright. Braising pun saya skip dah sebab saya dah terangkan banyak kali tadi. Braising ni is basically a combination of moist and dry heat. You bayangkan beef stew ataupun kalau di tingkat Asia ni bayangkanlah misalnya daging masak kicap ke daging kari, daging kurma ke. Okay. Nak baca dengan detail, you baca sendiri nanti. Okay. Illustration dia lebih kurang macam ni. Ini maybe beef tu cook over dry heat, maybe di saute atau pan fry dulu, tambah meripua, tambah stock or apa cairan, and dia akan jadilah masakan berkuah tu. Okay, as for sous vide sekejap saya share with you.
And I'm here today to talk to you about the modern cooking technique known as sous vide, and hopefully help you understand what it is and why so many chefs choose to use this wonderful cooking process. Literally translated to under vacuum, sous vide refers to the process of cooking food in a nicely controlled water bath in order to achieve consistent, high-quality results every single time. Typically, food is placed in plastic bags that are then vacuum sealed to ensure an efficient, safe cooking environment that is then transferred to a precisely controlled water bath.
So basically, sous vide is basically you need to seal a beef or anything that you want to cook inside a bag and then put it inside a water bath, which is at a certain temperature lah. Okay.
Until our food reaches the desired temperature. Alternatively, if you don't have a vacuum sealer, Ziploc bags may also be used, but be sure to clip them to the side of your tank. In essence, cooking is all about the implementation and control of heat throughout the cooking process. Whether this is through an oven, a grill, or even an open fire, all of these different heat sources are just different methods to introduce heat to our food in order to achieve a pleasant level of doneness. Let's take, for example, a traditional filet mignon that we're searing here in a really hot pan. What's happening is our raw, roughly 35-degree hunk of meat is beginning to absorb the energy as the heat from the pan transfers to the outer part of the steak, achieving that familiar crust. Then, as we move it to a 450-degree oven, it begins to be heated by the surrounding air. If we were to leave this in here forever, eventually it would turn to a black, burnt crisp as the steak attempts to come to equilibrium. Now, of course, we want to stop the cooking process long before it reaches that temperature. What we're looking for today is probably at about 135 degrees Fahrenheit, or a nice medium rare. But therein lies the trick. As the steak's heating in the oven, the surrounding air is actually what's transferring heat from the outside to the inside of the steak. So by the time the center of our steak reaches that 135 degrees, it's actually more done as you get towards the exterior, where the nice, delicious, crisp exterior is. Not to mention, as anyone can attest who's tried to cook a steak using this method, achieving that level of doneness is very difficult to do on a consistent basis. Herein lies the beauty of sous vide cooking. Using this piece of equipment known as an immersion circulator, we can precisely control the temperature of the cooking system, therein eliminating the guesswork as to what temperature our food is headed towards. Now, the principles behind this cooking method are nothing new. For thousands of years, cooks have been able to achieve similar results using similar methods. However, never before have they been able to replicate these results time and time again with the same precise control. Let's take a look at this tenderloin we've been circulating for 1 hour at 134.5 degrees Fahrenheit. As we pull it from our vacuum sealed bag, its texture is firm and its color is still slightly pinkish. We then transfer it to a very hot cast iron pan for a really quick sear, just to achieve the Maillard reaction on the outside of the steak. And we've got a steak that would make science proud. Just take a look at the difference between our sous vide tenderloin when compared with a traditionally cooked tenderloin. On the traditionally cooked tenderloin, you'll notice a gradient of doneness from the outside as it gets closer to the inside to that perfect medium rare. Meanwhile, our sous vide steak is perfect from top to bottom. I hope this helped you understand what sous vide is and why so many top chefs and now home users are choosing to use sous vide in their kitchens.
Yeah, so that's basically what sous vide is all about. Yeah, it's basically about cooking a food product in water inside a sealed plastic bag. Alright, but kalau you tengok contoh steak tadi, dia digunakan so that you can get a consistent medium rare or medium doneness inside steak. But one of the kelemahan of sous vide is it cannot produce the browning effect. So that's why at the end of the video you tengok Chef Adam tadi just sear the filet mignon from side to side, bukan untuk to cook it, but just to get uh, the coloration of the beef lah. Okay, all right. So that's it for this week's class. Okay, before I end this video, just a quick reminder for you all. When you come back after your Raya break, really make sure that you revise the recipe as well as the videos for the next lab session, yeah, which is relating to pastry. Okay, because lab 5 you'll be preparing the following dishes, which is the fruit tartlet, pandan chiffon cake, as well as Vienna cookies. And another one which will be added soon by Cik Rahijan is the recipe for chocolate mousse lah. Because bear in mind, For both pastry sessions, there will not be live demonstration, so you have to study the recipe thoroughly and watch the videos that have been provided. Meaning on the day of the class itself, on that Monday, you go to your stations. After I take your attendance, you can immediately take the ingredients and do preparation for all of your products. Once you're done, the evaluation will be done. Okay, so take note, for pastry session, there will be no demonstration. Therefore, you need to study the videos and recipe uh, earlier in advance. Kalau you tak study in advance, you nak rely on nota saja from A to Z, memang akan habis lambat lah. So please find time to study the recipe and strategize with your partner, yeah, of what you need to make. Okay. So open eLearn and look under heading Lab 5 materials. You can find the recipe for tartlet, pandan chiffon, Vienna, and soon akan ada apa tu, chocolate mousse ya, added in this section, as well as watch the video demonstration. This video yang saya upload ni ialah video demonstration tahun lepas you punya senior. So, saya terpaksa buat recording sebab balik lepas raya tak boleh ada kelas bersemuka dah. So I had to do video demonstration and they make report based on that. Okay, so please open eLearn. You may study the recipe and watch the video as much as you want sehingga you betul-betul faham and can remember the steps by heart. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll see each other after the Idul Fitri break. Take care. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.